Dr. or Morley Robbins has been on my show. You've talked to Morley Robbins about the importance of copper and how it relates to iron. I have always been anemic. My daughter has always been anemic. We've tried a million different iron supplements, didn't do a thing. I gave up, whatever. Now my iron is fantastic. However, my ferritin's high, and that's something we're going to deal with. But why are we seeing this iron overload during this pandemic and in this new era?
Yeah, so great question. I love Morley. Hi, Morley, if you're watching. I think you're a genius. Um, so Morley and I are colleagues, and he does really understand copper and iron deeply. He is, if you haven't read his book, The Cure is incredible. Actually, the gentleman right before this podcast, and the patient and client was like, I read The Cure, and I'm like, I didn't tell you about that. He's like, no, but it was really, you mentioned it somewhere on a podcast. So we love Morley. He's a genius of this work. So why is iron becoming such a big deal? I've also been very low in iron historically, not dangerously low, but generally never had an issue with iron. I had an iron overload this year. Again, back to the spike protein. Well, multiple factors occurred during this pandemic. One is we all took a bunch of zinc because we were told it helps with the spike protein, which it does. However, zinc is an antagonist to copper. So if you take one mineral in the absence of the other that it antagonizes, then you're already going to have an imbalance. The second thing is that, again, once the spike protein, the amyloids increased iron overload, and iron overload makes amyloid. So we know that the spike protein has vectors of amyloid genesis, and that's going to affect iron, turned on hemochromatosis. Iron then becomes oxidated, and then it does really bad things like builds biofilm and builds crystals and contributes to heart disease. And the spike protein naturally turns off copper. So we had two elements to turn off copper, and copper is the antagonist to iron, and oxidated iron really displaces mitochondrial function, because you need magnesium and carbon dioxide to run that ATP, but you need copper to start the engines. And without that, iron gets in place, it oxidates, becomes part of the reactive oxygen species. And this is why I'm being very cautious around hyperbaric chamber use right now, because the hyperbaric chamber increases oxygen. Well, if we're having a lot of ROS, it's the wrong oxygen. You're going to feel worse after HBOT than you did before. So please have your irons checked if you're going to do that. What's the fastest way to get rid of iron? Phlebotomize. Give blood. Give blood. Go to the Red Cross and give blood, or wherever your station is, that you'll be doing somebody some good, and also you'll be doing yourself some good as well. But yes, it's a really big deal, and I'm a very big proponent of your copper um, liquid, Sarah. I love it. I take it. I have it by my bedside, right? And what I also notice is when I take it before bed, the whites of my eyes are whiter in the morning. Why? Because it's helping my liver overnight manage that iron overload. That I took my iron. It was high in January. I did phlebotomy in April. I probably need to go back and do it again every quarter. And so I do notice that really helps. But iron is an oxidator. Oxidation makes things not work. It rusts us. So it's
Right.
a really important um, mention that is not typical to blood work.
So, taking a step back, can someone have a normal iron level but a high ferritin level? And how is that also related to high liver enzymes?
So the liver has to break down all these things, right? So again, back to the spike protein, which is making the amyloids, which is increasing the iron, which is making more amyloids, which is increasing liver function. I mean, the liver enzymes, because it's viral. And also beware of people that have extremely low iron. And Morley is a big, waving the flag of, hey, there are very few people who are really iron deficient. They're just not bioavailably making their iron. It's deeply stuck in their tissues. And I had a client who had iron levels of 2. Her free iron was 2, so dangerously low. But I also knew that it was not a function of not having it. It was just so deeply in the tissue. She agreed to a transfusion. Her iron went to 600, And she then had 3 autoimmune conditions. Why? I perceived that she turned on all these viruses because the iron turned on the amyloids, which turned on the viruses, which then created the autoimmunity. So we have to be really careful with iron right now, even if your iron is low. And I work with a very skilled doctor who also knows Dr. Stephen Spencer, who also knows Dr. Morley, who is a magic magician on getting iron up. So this person, we worked on her collaboratively. Her iron is now normalized without taking iron.
Hmm. Well, I can tell you personally, taking iron supplements didn't work for me. My iron is now normal with eating, the wild meats and whatever, and taking my copper and doing what I do now. So there's not a direct correlation between taking an iron supplement and boosting your iron to a healthy level.
Right. Right.
And you could possibly be taking a toxic iron supplement, which
Absolutely. And just like your daughter, back to your daughter, when they say these are the symptoms, the traditional medical community just says, let's throw a hormone at it. Well, she actually needed to be anti-hormone, okay?
yeah.
Because she was fat malabsorbed. So to put a potentially toxic hormone that's not even natural into a body that's not breaking down fat is, to me, it's unconscionable because but they don't understand it, right? They just don't understand that the reason why she was having so much trouble is because her liver was backed up because of the virus, which made the liver unhappy, which backed up hormones. And so you need to assimilate and really go low fat, not add more fat through a hormone.
And I have to just add to that. 3 days before we saw you, we hadn't started the progesterone. We never ended up starting the progesterone, but he had told us to start her on pregnenolone, and we did. And she already had a loss of appetite, and this girl eats like a horse. And I'm like, what is going on? She looks at food and she can't eat it, and she like will start crying, and then she would say, "Mom, just do a feeding tube down me.
Oh
Can
my
you do a
gosh.
feeding tube?" And then three days after taking the pregnenolone, it was even worse. And that's when we saw you. And she's my light. She's my happy girl. And when she was on with you, she had nothing on her face and no emotion, no energy, no nothing. So fast forward, this morning, she asks me to make her a bison ribeye for lunch.
Great.
I mean, this girl, she is eating and she's building herself back up. She's not back to where she was because it's going to take a little time. But my goodness, she is feeling confident that she's on the right path and she knows that you were right. And it's so, gosh, such a relief as a mom to know that I had made the right decision, because it's not even just about me, it's about my child. And for all of you moms out there, you know that you don't care about you when it comes to your own child. So that's what's so interesting on the hormones, because no one thinks about the fact that if your liver's backed up, then you can't even process what you're taking. And this comes back to one of the first questions I ever had for you when I was eating a ton of vegetables from the sulfur family, the broccoli, cauliflower, and all of that. And I said, well, Teri, if my body needs sulfur, how am I going to get it if I'm not eating it? And you said, well, you're not even using it now because your body can't break it down or use it. So there's this chasm between what you're taking in and your body actually converting it into energy or doing its job in your body. And if that's not working, then you want to just take it off, take the pressure off the system and let the system calm down.
Absolutely. And the good news is animal protein, the right kind of animal protein, is sulfur rich, but it doesn't it has the kind of the protective amino acids around it that makes it digestible.